Ambassador Kim Sejin walked slowly into the grand meeting hall on Nexus Prime. The massive room always made her feel small. Tall pillars stretched up to a ceiling that seemed to touch the stars. The walls glowed with soft blue light that hurt human eyes after too long. She had been coming here for 10 years, and she still hated everything about this place. The other council members were already seated in their high chairs. They looked down at her like she was a child who had misbehaved. The Altrian representative, Velkan, sat highest of all. His blue skin shimmered under the lights, and his forearms moved gracefully as he sorted through data tablets. To his right sat the massive Vrelian delegate, whose rock-like skin made grinding sounds when he shifted. On the left perched the bird-like Zephyrian, her feathers constantly changing colors with her mood. Kim took her place at the small human desk on the floor level. It was positioned so she had to crane her neck to see the council members properly. This was intentional. Everything about this room was designed to remind humans of their place in the galactic order. Ambassador Kim, Velkan's voice boomed through the chamber. We trust Earth has prepared its compliance report regarding Resolution 847 Delta. Kim's jaw tightened. Resolution 847 Delta. Such a clean, bureaucratic name for destroying 3 million human lives. She opened her datapad and pretended to read, though she had memorized every cruel word weeks ago. The Galactic Council has determined that human colonies on Kepler 442b, Proxima Centauri C, and Wolf 359b represent inefficient use of galactic resources. These worlds will be reassigned to Vrelian agricultural development within 30 standard rotations. All human inhabitants must relocate to designated sectors within the Sol system. The words tasted like ash in her mouth as she read them aloud. 30 days to abandon worlds that humans had spent decades building. 30 days to pack up entire civilizations and squeeze them into the overcrowded inner colonies. The council spoke of humans like they were furniture to be moved around. The evacuation timeline seems generous, commented the Zephyrian representative, her feathers shifting to a pleased golden color. My species would manage such a relocation in half the time. Humans require more guidance, Velkan replied with what Kim assumed was meant to be kindness. They are still learning efficient civilization management. Kim felt her hands shake slightly. Learning efficient civilization management. As if humans were students in some cosmic classroom instead of a species with their own rights and dignity. This had been happening for 4 to 7 years. Ever since the Council had made first contact with Earth, they had treated humanity like dangerous children. The official term was the Guided Development Protocol. Humans could only develop certain technologies. They could only settle specific worlds. They could only trade with approved species. And whenever the Council wanted something humans had built, they simply took it. Ambassador Kim, Velkan continued, surely you understand this is for the greater galactic good. The Vrelians can produce food on these worlds to feed billions across 17 star systems. Human recreational colonies serve only a few million. Recreational colonies. Kim almost laughed. Kepler 442b housed the primary human agricultural research station. Proxima Centauri C contained the largest human university outside of Earth. Wolf 359b was home to 3 million civilians who had spent their entire lives building cities, raising families, and creating art. But to the Council, these were just recreational colonies. She looked up at the towering figures above her. They weren't evil, she realized. They genuinely believed they were helping humanity by controlling them. In their minds, humans were like wild animals that needed to be managed for their own good. The thought made her feel sick. The Council's wisdom is always appreciated, Kim said carefully. She had learned long ago that showing anger only made things worse. The Council would just pat her on the head and explain again why humans needed their guidance. Excellent, Velkan's 4 hands clapped together. We expect the evacuation to proceed smoothly. The Vrelian development teams will arrive in 4 to 5 rotations to begin agricultural preparation. Kim nodded and made notes on her datapad. But her mind was elsewhere, remembering a conversation from last week. She had been visiting her old friend Park Minute-Ho, who now worked with Colonial Defense. They had been discussing the latest restrictions on human technology when Minute-Ho had said something that stuck with her. You know what bothers me most? He had asked. They think they know us. They think humans are predictable, emotional, violent, short-sighted. They've built their whole strategy around what they think we are. And what are we? Kim had asked. Minute-Ho had smiled. It wasn't a happy expression. Patient. Now, sitting in this chamber of condescending aliens, Kim understood what he meant. The council saw human anger and assumed it meant humans were impulsive. They saw human emotion and assumed it meant humans were irrational. They saw human questions and assumed it meant humans were confused. They had no idea that humans could be angry and still plan carefully. They didn't understand that human emotion could fuel human determination. They never considered that human questions might be human intelligence gathering. Kim finished taking her notes and stood up. The human delegation will prepare the evacuation procedures immediately. Very good, Velkan dismissed her with a wave. Standard efficiency protocols apply, of course. As Kim walked toward the exit, she activated her personal communicator with her thumb. A simple message went out across the human data network, hidden in routine diplomatic traffic. 5 words that would change everything. The shepherd grows tired of counting sheep. By the time she reached her shuttle, responses were already flowing back from across human space. Colony governors, fleet commanders, research directors, and civilian leaders. All sending the same reply. Message received. Ready to proceed. Kim smiled for the first time in months. The council thought they knew humanity. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Dr. Han Ji-woo stepped through the hidden doorway behind the water recycling systems on Nuna Station. To anyone watching the security cameras, he was just conducting routine maintenance checks. The council's monitoring systems showed him inspecting pipes and checking pressure gauges. They had no idea that behind the maintenance panel lay the most secret facility in human space. The elevator descended 15 levels below the official station blueprints. When the doors opened, Ji-woo walked into a bustling command center that officially did not exist. Dozens of humans worked at computer stations, analyzing data streams from across the galaxy. Holographic displays showed star charts, ship designs, and alien biology reports. The soft hum of quantum processors filled the air. Morning report, Ji-woo called out as he walked to the central planning table. Engineer Choi Yi-jin looked up from her calculations. She was 28 years old and had already revolutionized human engine technology 3 times. The council thought she was a simple maintenance worker on a mining station. Quantum displacement drives are ready for deployment, she said quietly. All 300 vessels are equipped and tested. The council's sensors still read our engines as standard fusion drives. Ji-woo nodded. For 15 years, humanity's brightest minds had been working on technologies the council had forbidden. The aliens believed they had restricted human development to safe, controllable levels. They had no idea that humans had learned to hide their real achievements behind fake energy signatures and false sensor readings. Captain Lim Jae-minute approached the table from across the room. His official job was managing security for a small research outpost. His real job was coordinating the largest intelligence operation in galactic history. Status from our friends, Jae-minute reported. The Kalari resistance cells are in position around their homeworld. The Threnody underground has secured their major spaceports. The Mikari rebels have taken control of 3 orbital platforms. This had been humanity's greatest discovery. The Galactic Council wasn't a voluntary alliance of 17 species. It was one species controlling 16 others. The Altarians had conquered the galaxy slowly, patiently, making each victory look like peaceful cooperation. They had used the same guided development protocol on everyone. But unlike other species, humans had figured out the truth. And unlike other species, humans had done something about it. Any word from the sleeper agents? Ji-woo asked. Communications Officer Park Soo-bin looked up from her encrypted console. Agent Lee reports the Council's military codes have been compromised. Agent Kim confirms their fleet deployment schedules are accurate. Agent O has full access to their emergency communication protocols. For 30 years, humans with hidden talents had taken jobs throughout Council space. They worked as translators, technicians, researchers, and administrators. The Council found humans useful for boring jobs that required attention to detail. They never suspected that these helpful humans were quietly copying every piece of information they could access. The Council had made a critical mistake. They assumed that because they controlled human technology, they controlled human intelligence. They thought that keeping humans away from advanced computers would keep them from learning advanced secrets. They had never considered that human memory and human patience could be more dangerous than any machine. What about our industrial capacity? Ji-woo asked Engineer Choi. Asteroid mining operations are producing at 300% of reported capacity, she replied. The Council thinks we're barely meeting basic metal quotas. Actually, we've been stockpiling resources for 20 years. Every major human colony has hidden manufacturing facilities. This was possible because the council didn't understand human psychology. They saw human complaints about regulations and assumed humans were simply bad at following rules. When human colonies reported struggles with meeting production quotas, the council believed them and offered helpful suggestions. They never realized that humans were experts at appearing less capable than they actually were. The central holographic display showed a real-time map of human space. Green dots marked loyal colonies. Blue dots showed military installations. Red dots indicated council monitoring stations. To any council observer, it would look like a normal administrative overview. They couldn't see the hidden signals that showed the true scope of human preparation. Civilian evacuation status. Jiwoo asked Administrator Jung-eun Bai, who had just arrived from the outer territories. 90% complete, she reported. We've been moving non-essential personnel away from strategic locations for 6 months. The council thinks we're just optimizing resource distribution. Actually, we're getting our people to safety before the shooting starts. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. For decades, the council had trained humans to follow their orders without question. Human requests for population transfers, resource allocations, and infrastructure changes were automatically approved. The council never bothered to analyze the pattern of human requests. If they had, they would have realized that humans were systematically repositioning themselves for war. Timeline confirmation. Jiwoo asked Captain Lim. 48 hours after Ambassador Kim's signal, Lim replied. All units will be in position. All allies have confirmed readiness. All targets have been identified. Jiwoo looked around the room at the faces of his team. These were humans who had spent their entire adult lives preparing for this moment. They had endured decades of humiliation, restriction, and condescension. They had watched their species be treated like children while secretly becoming the most dangerous force in the galaxy. The irony was perfect. The council had tried to control human development by limiting human technology. But they had forgotten that the most important human technology was the human brain. And human brains had been working on this problem for almost half a century. Signal from Ambassador Kim should come any moment now, Park Soo-bin announced from her communication station. All networks are ready to relay. Jiwoo smiled. The council thought they knew humanity. They had studied human behavior, human psychology, human culture. They had written extensive reports about human predictability and human limitations. They believed they understood everything about their human subjects. They were about to learn the difference between understanding humans and underestimating them. The communication console beeped. Ambassador Kim's message had arrived. It was time to show the galaxy what patient humans could accomplish. Ambassador Kim Soo-jin walked across the polished floor of the council chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space, each sound sharp and clear. Today felt different from all the other times she had made this walk. Today, she was not coming here to beg or negotiate or accept another humiliation. Today, she was coming to change everything. The 17 council members sat in their elevated seats, looking down at her as always. Velkan, the blue-skinned Altrian leader, shuffled through his data tablets with casual indifference. The massive Vrelian delegate made his usual grinding noises. The bird-like Zephyrian preened her colorful feathers. None of them seemed to notice that Kim looked different today. She had stopped hunching her shoulders. Her head was held high. Her hands were steady. For the first time in 10 years of diplomatic visits, she was not afraid of these aliens. Ambassador Kim, Velkan's voice boomed across the chamber. We trust you have prepared the evacuation schedules for the 3 human colonies. Kim reached the center of the room and stopped. She looked up at the towering council members, then slowly pulled out her data pad. The chamber was completely quiet except for the soft humming of the environmental systems. The human delegation has reviewed Resolution 847 Delta, Kim said clearly. Her voice carried to every corner of the massive room. Excellent, Velkan leaned forward in his chair. The sooner we can begin the transition, the better for all involved parties. Kim looked directly at him. She had practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times. No. The single word hung in the air like a physical thing. For several seconds, nobody moved. The council members stared down at her as if she had spoken in some alien language they could not understand. I beg your pardon? Velkan's 4 hands stopped moving entirely. I said no, Kim repeated, louder this time. Humanity will not evacuate those colonies. We will not relocate our people. We will not follow this resolution. The chamber erupted. Council members began talking at once, their voices overlapping in a chaos of confusion and outrage. The Zephyrian's feathers shifted to an angry red color. The Vrelian's grinding sounds became harsh and violent. Smaller council members chattered in their native languages. "This is impossible," declared the insect-like Hixtar representative. "Humans do not refuse council directives." "Humans have never refused anything," added the gas-breathing Corlin, speaking through his translation device. Velkan raised all four hands for silence. The chamber gradually became quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was cold and dangerous. "Ambassador Kim, perhaps you do not understand the consequences of defying a council resolution. Your species depends on our protection and guidance. Without council support, humanity would collapse within months." Kim smiled. It was not a diplomatic smile or a polite smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret that was about to stop being secret. "Would we?" she asked. As she spoke, every holographic display in the chamber suddenly flickered to life. The screens that normally showed boring administrative data now displayed something that made every council member freeze in shock. Ships. Hundreds of human ships appearing around every major council world. But these were not the primitive vessels the council expected to see. These ships were sleek and beautiful, with hulls that seemed to bend light around them. They moved with impossible grace and speed. And they were everywhere. "What is this?" Velkan's voice cracked slightly. "This is humanity saying no," Kim replied calmly. The displays showed more images. Human ships emerging from hyperspace around the Altrian homeworld. Human forces taking positions near Vrelian agricultural centers. Human vessels surrounding Zephyrian trade routes. Every major council installation suddenly had human ships nearby. "Impossible," breathed the Threnody representative. "Human technology is limited to basic fusion drives and simple weapons. These ships are using quantum displacement and adaptive shielding." "Are they?" Kim asked innocently. "And how would you know what those technologies look like?" The question hit the council like a physical blow. For 4 to 7 years, they had told humanity that certain technologies were too dangerous or too advanced for human minds to understand. They had forbidden human research into quantum mechanics, adaptive materials, and hyperspace engineering. The fact that a council member could immediately identify these technologies proved they had been lying all along. "You have been developing restricted technologies," Velkan accused, his blue skin darkening with anger. "We have been developing human technologies," Kim corrected. "There is a difference." Captain Yoon Taiho's voice suddenly filled the chamber, broadcast from the flagship of the human fleet. "Council members, this is Admiral Yoon of the Human Forces. We are not here to attack or invade. We are here to demonstrate that the age of human compliance is over." The displays shifted to show scenes from across the galaxy. Kalari rebels emerging from hiding, supported by human forces. Threnody resistance fighters taking control of their orbital stations with human help. Mikari underground cells revealing human-supplied weapons and equipment. "This is impossible," Velkan repeated, but his voice was weaker now. "You are just humans." Kim walked closer to his elevated platform. "Just humans," she repeated thoughtfully. "Do you know what you never understood about humans, Velkan?" "What?" he asked despite himself. "You assumed that because you could control our technology, you could control our intelligence. You thought that because you restricted our access to advanced computers, we could not learn advanced concepts. You never considered that human minds might be more dangerous than human machines." The chamber was completely silent now. Every council member was staring at the displays showing human forces throughout their territory. Ships they could not match. Technologies they had convinced themselves humans could not develop. Allies they never knew humans had been gathering. "For 4 to 7 years, you have treated us like children," Kim continued. "You spoke about us as if we were not in the room. You made decisions about our lives as if we had no say in our own fate. You called us primitive and violent and unpredictable." She paused and looked around at all the shocked alien faces. "You were half right. We are unpredictable. Because you never predicted this." Fleet Admiral Yoon Taiho stood on the bridge of the New Sol, watching the massive council fleet scramble to respond to the human presence around their capital world. Through the main view screen, he could see dozens of alien warships moving into attack formations. Their hulls gleamed with the same arrogant confidence that had defined council military doctrine for centuries. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the council fleet," reported Communications Officer Park Soo-bin. "They are demanding our immediate withdrawal." "Put them through," Yoon replied calmly. The view screen flickered, showing the face of Fleet Commander Zektar, an Altrian military leader whose blue skin was flushed with rage. Behind him, Yoon could see the bridge of the council's most powerful dreadnought, the cosmic harmony. Human vessels, you are in violation of 17 galactic security protocols, Zektar snarled. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Yoon smiled politely. Commander Zektar, we appreciate your concern. However, we are not withdrawing. In fact, we are just getting started. You dare threaten the Council? Zektar's 4 hands clenched into fists. Your primitive ships cannot match our firepower. We have been building warships for 1,000 years. And we have been studying them for 47, Yoon replied. Would you like a demonstration? Without waiting for an answer, Yoon nodded to his weapons officer. Lieutenant Kim Minute-jun pressed a single control, and the new Soul's quantum disruptor arrays fired a brief pulse toward empty space. The energy beam created a perfect sphere of twisted space-time that hung in the void like a small artificial star. The effect on the Council fleet was immediate. Every ship's sensors screamed warnings about gravitational anomalies and impossible energy readings. Several of the smaller vessels actually began backing away from the display of power they could not understand. Impressive, is it not? Yoon asked conversationally. We call it a quantum disruption field. It can bend space itself. Your strongest shields would not even slow it down. Zektar stared at the impossible sight, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Finally, he managed to speak. This technology is forbidden. Humans do not have access to quantum manipulation. According to who? Yoon asked. You? You told us many things were forbidden. You told us we could not develop faster-than-light communication. You told us we could not create adaptive materials. You told us we could not build ships that could phase through normal matter. Shall I demonstrate those capabilities as well? As if responding to his words, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Captain O Minutseo's voice crackled through the communication system from the Kalari homeworld. Admiral, the liberation of the Kalari colonies is complete. Their people are free for the first time in 300 years. No casualties on either side. Captain Bae Inho reported from the Threnody system, all orbital platforms secured. The Threnody resistance has taken control of their government. The Council garrison surrendered without a fight. Captain Seo Ji-won announced from the Mikari territories, Mikari independence has been declared. Their new government has requested formal alliance with humanity. With each report, Zektar's expression grew more desperate. The Council had built their power on the assumption that no single species could challenge them. They had never considered what would happen if multiple species worked together against them. This is impossible, Zektar whispered. We control the galaxy. We have the strongest military. We have the most advanced technology. You had the most advanced technology, Yoon corrected gently. But that was when you were the only ones allowed to develop it. Competition changes everything, does it not? On the bridge of the New Soul, tactical displays showed the true scope of the human operation. Across 17 star systems, Council forces were discovering that their weapons could barely scratch human shields. Their fastest ships could not catch human vessels. Their most secure communications were being intercepted and decoded in real time. But more importantly, they were discovering that they were alone. Species after species was abandoning the Council, joining the Human Alliance, or simply declaring neutrality. The great galactic empire that had seemed unshakable was crumbling in a matter of hours. How? Zektar asked finally. How did you do this? We listened, Yoon replied. For 47 years, we sat in your meetings and listened to you talk about us as if we were not there. We heard you call us primitive. We heard you laugh about keeping us contained. We heard you discuss our fate like we were livestock to be managed. He paused, letting the words sink in. But most importantly, we listened to what you said about yourselves. We learned your weaknesses. We studied your tactics. We mapped your supply lines. We identified every flaw in your empire. And then we spent decades preparing to exploit those flaws. The tactical display showed Council fleets across the galaxy attempting to respond to the human offensive, but they were too slow, too predictable. Human strategists had wargamed every possible Council response years in advance. You see, Commander, you made a critical error, Yoon continued. You assumed that intelligence could be controlled by controlling technology. You thought that if you kept advanced computers away from humans, humans could not learn advanced concepts. You never understood that the most dangerous weapon any species can possess is time to think. Zektar's image flickered as his ship's systems struggled to maintain communication through the quantum disruption field. What do you want? He asked desperately. Yoon's expression became serious. We want what every thinking being deserves. freedom, dignity, the right to determine our own future. The Council's age of absolute power is over. The question now is whether it ends with negotiation or with force. The bridge fell silent as they waited for Zektar's response. Across the galaxy, the greatest empire in galactic history was learning what happened when patient humans finally decided they had been patient long enough. 6 months later, Coordinator Kim Sujin stood in what had once been the Galactic Council chamber. The room looked completely different now. The high platforms where council members had looked down on lesser species were gone. In their place sat circular rows of equal seats where representatives from 43 species worked together as partners. The morning session was just beginning, and Kim watched as delegates filed in from across the galaxy. The Kalari representative, Veltana, nodded respectfully as she passed. Just 6 months ago, her people had been slaves working in council mines. Today, she was helping draft new trade agreements that would benefit her entire species. Dr. Han Ji-woo approached Kim with his daily reports. His official title was now Director of Galactic Technology Sharing, but Kim still thought of him as the brilliant scientist who had helped plan humanity's greatest victory. "How are the transitions going?" Kim asked. "Better than expected," Ji-woo replied with a smile. "The former council worlds are adapting to representative government faster than we hoped. It turns out that most species actually prefer having a voice in their own affairs." Kim nodded. This had been the biggest surprise after the council's collapse. For centuries, the Altarians had claimed that other species needed their guidance to maintain order. They had insisted that without firm leadership, the galaxy would fall into chaos. Instead, the opposite had happened. Free species were more productive, more creative, and more peaceful than they had ever been under council rule. "Any problems with former council loyalists?" Kim asked. "Very few," Ji-woo reported. "Most of the council's administrators were just following orders because they had no choice. When given the option to participate in the new system, most of them eagerly joined. Even many Altarians prefer the assembly to their old empire." Through the great windows of the chamber, Kim could see ships from dozens of worlds docking at the station. Threnody art vessels bringing cultural exhibitions to share with other species. Mikari research ships collaborating with human scientists on medical advances. Kalari merchant vessels trading freely without council restrictions. The transformation had been remarkable. Under the council system, each species had been isolated, allowed to interact only through official channels. Now, with freedom to communicate directly, they were discovering how much they had in common. Trade was flourishing. Scientific cooperation was advancing faster than anyone had imagined. Cultural exchanges were creating new forms of art and literature. Former Council Prime Velkan approached Kim hesitantly. He had lost weight since the assembly was formed, and his blue skin seemed duller than before. Kim still remembered him as the arrogant leader who had treated humans like children. Now he was simply another representative, equal to all the others. "Coordinator Kim," he said quietly, "might I speak with you privately?" Kim gestured toward a quiet corner of the chamber. They walked together past displays showing the assembly's achievements, trade agreements that benefited all parties, scientific discoveries shared freely, peaceful resolution of territorial disputes. "I have been thinking about something for months," Velkan began. "When you had us defeated, when our fleets were destroyed and our empire was crumbling, you could have simply taken our place as rulers of the galaxy." Kim listened without interrupting. "Any species in your position would have done exactly that," Velkan continued. "We would have. The Vrelians would have. The Zephyrians certainly would have. But you did not. Instead, you created this." He gestured around the chamber where species that had been enemies for centuries were now working together. "Why?" Velkan asked finally. "Why did you choose to share power instead of taking it?" Kim considered the question carefully. It was one she had been asked many times by many species, and her answer was always the same. "Because taking your place would have made us just like you," she said simply. "The council failed because it believed that some species were naturally superior to others. If we had replaced you as galactic rulers, we would have been accepting that same false belief." She paused, watching a group of young beings from different species working together on a holographic display. Human children, Kalari younglings, Threnody hatchlings, and others, all learning together without any thought that some were supposed to be better than others. "We did not fight the council to prove that humans were superior," Kim continued. "We fought to prove that no species is superior. Every thinking being deserves freedom, dignity, and the right to shape their own future." Velkan was quiet for a long moment. "The council genuinely believed we were helping the galaxy," he said finally. We thought that without strong leadership, everything would collapse into violence and chaos. And what have you learned? Kim asked gently. That freedom does not create chaos, Velkan replied. Fear of freedom creates chaos. When beings are free to choose cooperation, they usually do. Kim smiled. That was humanity's greatest discovery. The Council tried to control us because you feared what we might do with freedom. But you never asked what we actually wanted to do. Most humans, most Kalari, most Threnody, most beings of any species just want to live peacefully, raise their families, and contribute something meaningful to the universe. As if to illustrate her point, the afternoon session bell chimed, and representatives began taking their seats for the day's discussions. There would be debates and disagreements, as there always were when free beings tried to work together. But there would also be compromise, cooperation, and solutions that no single species could have developed alone. The Council's greatest mistake, Kim said as they walked back toward the main floor, was assuming that diversity was a problem to be managed instead of a strength to be celebrated. Velkan took his seat among the other representatives, no longer above anyone, no longer below anyone. Just another voice in the great conversation of free species working together. Kim looked around the chamber one final time before the session began. Humanity had achieved something that had never existed in galactic history, true equality among the stars. The age of human compliance was over. The age of galactic cooperation had begun.